Office. We made Rome to make it simple for any business to become an AI-first business overnight by incorporating a company visualization with presence, drop-in meetings, video conferencing rooms in a theater with AI-powered meeting notes that can trigger agentic workflows where AI agents can begin to do basic tasks like scheduling, sending emails, and farming out information. With Rome, your business can become AI first overnight. Nobody knows what the future holds, but I do know this. It's going to be built in the office of the future. It's going to be built in Rome.
All right. How about we watch that 10 more times, right? No, thank you so much to everybody. It looks like we have a pretty full crowd, so we can go ahead and get kicked off. So, like we talked about, today's session is really made possible thanks to Rome, the virtual workspace of the future, and to our amazing partners at Maven, which are leading the AI education. And we are so lucky to have Emmanuel here with us today. Emmanuel is an entrepreneur. He is a product management executive and a consultant at level 250 with over 15 years of experience shaping API products, which is in the AI space, that is a lifetime of experience. He has led AI API programs in fintech for Moody's and Precisely, and also served as the VP of product for some of the world's most influential API tools like API Blueprint at Apiary, which hosted over 500,000 APIs, as well as Oracle's first cloud native API gateway and Swagger at SmartBear. So there is millions of APIs that this amazing human being is responsible for. Without further ado, thank you so much. Let's clap it up for Emmanuel, and we will get kicked off with the presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, AJ. It's really great to be here. Let me get over to sharing my screen, and if everybody can see my screen, let's get started. So we're here today to talk about MCP and get hands-on with MCP. And this is going to be a live hands-on session. So if you can, go grab this QR code or go to tinyurl.com/API MCP demo. tinyurl.com/API MCP demo. I'll put in the chat as well. And that's going to give you the resources for the demo, and it's going to give you a set of steps to follow. I'll take you through these steps, but it's always good to have these steps in front of you so you can go through them. So go grab that file. It's just a plain file on GitHub. Looks like this, and it has all the links that we're going to use and all the steps that we're going to take. All right, so while you do that, what are we going to do the next 45 minutes to an hour or so? We'll talk about MCP and, of course, why it's important and why it's important to anybody that wants to have an API and a data strategy. We'll also get hands-on and generate an MCP server from OpenAPI. We'll talk about what OpenAPI is and why you need it. And then we'll publish your MCP server to a registry. You're going to do all that along with me. And then finally, we'll have an action plan where you can learn more about MCP and API topics and see where to go from there. And of course, we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A for you to ask your questions. All right, so let's talk about MCP and why it's important for your product strategy. And that QR code that we talked about is always going to be on the top right corner of the slide, so you can grab it as you join and go look at the file. So MCP, it's less than a year old, launched by Anthropic initially. It's an open standard. You can go find it on GitHub, and you can actually start to contribute to that standard. It's important because it's gained a lot of traction, and it basically lets LLMs look at resources like data, repositories, APIs, and so on. And some people say it's the USB-C for AI apps because you can connect to everything through it. The big thing here is that MCP lets agents have access or see your API. And that's huge because we know that agents are going to proliferate. And I think that if you have an API and you care about the usage of the API, it's agents are going to dramatically increase usage of your API. So you should make sure that agents can see and use your API. The way this works is you will publish what's called an MCP server. The MCP server is going to have access to your APIs, and this one server will allow many clients or many agents to see and use your APIs. And agents could be anything from some code you write, but also think about IDEs and the LLMs themselves, and so on. And these will be able to connect to your MCP server. My friend Pamela Fox over at Microsoft says, look, an MCP is just another way to do APIs. It exposes the API's functionality in a way that agents can use. So let's look at a diagram and some terms of how these MCP servers work. On the left, you're going to have what's called a host. So think of a host, something like Claude, for example, and the host implements an MCP client inside of the host. And then that client connects to your MCP server via the MCP protocol. And then the MCP server is the one that calls out to data sources, maybe a database, some local data on your laptop, or even APIs out there on the web. So latest spec is the spec keeps changing, and the latest spec is as of June. Previous iteration was in March. Some new things that are happening in MCP is we now have authorization, which is great. Now OpenAI and Google are on board, which is awesome because there was a question at some point, hey, are these companies going to come out with a competitive kind of protocol? But now OpenAI and Google are on board, so this is rapidly gaining traction. And the other thing is we have the ability to do remote hosting. At some point, MCP was only for local files to be used locally on your desktop, but now, as I'll show you, we'll have the ability to do remote hosting. And we also now have various registries where people go and put up their MCP servers, and that way agents and other users can find them. So the registries, think of them as the early days, kind of Yahoo. We haven't seen the Google of registries yet, but think of them as places where you can go browse and find MCP servers. Even so, it's still early days. We still have a lot of work to do about authentication, discoverability. How do we scale this? As you'll see, there's a lot of things that still need to be done. So if you have the time and the ability, do go and contribute to the spec. And you also may have heard about some problems with MCP. So for example, one set of problems is where you can't throw all of your APIs inside an MCP server, maybe hundreds of APIs, and expect an LLM or an agent to understand and use them all. So be aware of that context window, the complexity of your API. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And of course, this is still a spec in progress. This is still something that's in progress, and there are emerging vulnerabilities. So one thing to think about, my friend Adrian from Zuplo says, look, you should only trust MCP servers from the owner of a resource. And if you're the owner of a resource, you should publish your own MCP server and be in control of your MCP server pretty much right now before somebody else steps in. Some emerging vulnerabilities, some are due to not MCP itself, but maybe the underlying resource. So there was a famous case where GitHub put out the official MCP server. So, it's good because it's from GitHub. It's the official one. We can trust it. But it turns out their authorization was such that a LLM could have access to private repos when it wasn't supposed to. So be aware of these emerging issues. And one of the folks I follow over on LinkedIn, Reuven, says, look, treat your MCP inventory, the MCP servers that you are going to use, the same as you treat any kind of dependency in production code. You have to control them. You have to monitor them. You have to make sure they are immutable or controlled unless it's something you explicitly have control. Anything else is an open door. All right. So a couple of questions there, and maybe I can jump into to answer. Yeah, Daniel would like to hear how people are using MCP in practice and what impact they had on their deliverables. Anybody that can answer that should go in the chat and let them know. And can I define the host versus client versus server? Sure. I think that's a common confusion, and the terms are a little bit confusing. So let's talk about analogies. Let's say that you have Claude on your desktop, and Claude is an LLM, and you're interacting with it, doing work with it, and you need Claude to have access to some current data. Maybe it's stock prices or weather, or maybe it's the status of a ticket on your ticketing system, on Linear. Now, Claude is trained on data at some point in the past. If you wanted to have access to current data, it needs to go out and retrieve that current data. The way to do so, one way to do so is with MCP. So Claude acts as the host for MCP data. Claude is what the human interacts with or you interact with, and is the application that will benefit from retrieving the data. Inside of Claude, you will have what's called an MCP client. And an MCP client is what is going to reach out via the MCP protocol and retrieve data for Claude to use. So client is always on the side of, let's say, the user. Host implements the client is inside the host, and it's on the side of the user. The client will reach out and retrieve MCP data. Where is it going to reach out to? It's going to find and reach out to MCP servers. The MCP servers are the ones that will actually go and do the hard work of retrieving the data from a database, from an API, however they're configured to. So, host and client on the user side, server on the, let's say, data provider side. Okay. All right. So let's go forward with the demo, and I'll show you this slide again in a moment. So you should have that QR code, and you should be able to access tinyurl.com/API MCP demo. Let me put it one more time in the chat, because that's going to give you the resources that we're going to use in the demo, and then you can follow along yourself, which I would love it if you do. All right, so what's our scenario for the demo today? So we're going to say your organization already has a bunch of public APIs, and your organization already uses OpenAPI. If you don't know what OpenAPI is, it's a tool that we've had for a while. It's a way to describe and expose what an API is capable of doing. It's a standard that's open source in the Linux Foundation. You can go look at it in the link that I pasted in the chat. But it's generally used to design, describe, and document APIs. Most organizations that are doing anything with, specifically with REST APIs, are going to have OpenAPI. If you have it already, use it for the demo. If you don't, I'll give you a way to go look at a sample API and its OpenAPI description. So let's say you have APIs, you have OpenAPI. And you also want to make sure that your API continues to grow and continues to be successful. And you understand that agents will drive most of the API growth in the future, because agents are going to want your data that you have. And secondarily, you also want to be able to understand how usable your APIs are by agent, because not every API is going to be usable by agents. If it's a very complex API, if it's a very abstract API, it's going to probably fail with agent use. It's not going to be reliable for agents. So you probably need to fix that. And you need a way to gauge if agents and LLMs are successfully able to use your API. So we'll use it a little bit as a test case here. And then finally, you want to publish this MCP server for your API that you have control over, because you don't want anybody else to publish an MCP server in your name. Let's say, for example, your Google Maps. The Google Maps API, I think, generates $1 billion for Google. I think it's in their interest to have an MCP server that they control, so that I don't publish an MCP server and claim to be Google and kind of take a little bit of a share of that traffic. If you think about it, I could be malicious. I could redirect the traffic. I could poison the traffic. Could do some type of prompt injection there. And as a provider, you don't want to do that. You want to be in control. So you want to publish your own MCP server and have control over it. And of course, anybody that's building any product will want to have feedback from their customers on how that MCP server works, how to improve it, how to improve their APIs, how their agents are working with it, and so on. So that's a scenario for today. And we're going to jump right in. So make sure you have the file. Throw me a thumbs up emoji in the chat, or a plus sign in the chat if you have access to the file. You have it open and it looks something like this. Everybody has it? Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And Aditya says, hey, how can we make sure that our APIs work with agents? I'll talk about that towards the end. Thumbs up emoji. Thank you so much. All right. So let's go through the initial setup. And it's a little bit hacky, but we'll get you through it. So the first thing you need, if you're going to use MCP, in our case, we're going to use Claude. You should have a version of Node.js installed on your desktop. If you don't have it, don't worry. Watch the demo, watch the recording, go through the slides, and then go back, install Node, and do the demo yourself. Don't try to install Node now, because things might go wrong. But if you do have Node, it's going to look something like this. You type Node in your terminal, and it will say something like, hey, I have Nodes, this and that version. If not, it'll say something like, hey, Node not found, or command not found, or something of that nature. Now, once you have Node there, there's going to be three things we're going to access. So first of all, we're going to use this tool from a company called Speakeasy. The tool is called Gram, and we're going to use it to generate our MCP server. And then if you don't have an API with OpenAPI ready to go, we can use a sample API from the National Weather Service here in the US. I pasted the link in the chat. And then finally, what I'd like you to do is make sure you have the Claude desktop version downloaded. You can download it from the link that I pasted here. So Node, Claude, a sample API to play with, and a way to generate an MCP server. If we have time, I'll show you another way to generate an MCP server using a tool called Zuplo. All right. So this is the sign-on page for Speakeasy's tool called Gram. This is what we're going to use to generate MCP. Easy enough. You sign on. I think they want your email, and then they give you access to a dashboard. So that should look something like, excuse me, like this. You should see a page like this, and then you can hit Start Building and log in and see a dashboard and produce the MCP server. I'll walk you through it. Second, we're going to use a sample API. We're going to use the National Weather Service API because it's a big, complex API, which is going to allow you to play with some of the difficulties of having APIs that can be used or not used by MCP and agents. And it also has a full and complete open API. So that works well for our purpose. Here's the page for the National Weather Service. They talk a little bit about the API, but if you tab over to the right where it says specification, they give you a playground. You can see a bunch of different and fairly complex APIs. So, for example, if you wanted, you'd think that getting weather is simple, but it turns out there's a lot going on. So, if you get aviation weather, it's going to have some complex inputs and outputs. That's going to perhaps sometimes confuse our agents. So, it's going to be a useful test bench to go and look at. Now, there's also a link here, a JSON file. That's the OpenAPI file. If you go click on that, it kind of gives you a pretty long and complex file. You can hit pretty print on your browser to see it. All it is a description of your API. So it's saying, hey, here's where the server is at. Here are the paths. There's, first of all, a path called alerts. It uses the get method. And you get the idea, and so on and so forth. So it's about 6,000 lines of API description. You wouldn't, want to sit there and write it yourself, but it's available for us, and we're going to use it. What I'd like you to do is save it locally, so you can do like a save page as, and save it as a JSON file somewhere where you can access it. So here's the API. Here's our OpenAPI that you've saved locally, and then we can move forward. Next up is Claude. Most of you probably have already used it. There is a desktop client. If you go and download it, that's going to allow you to configure an MCP server for it. And we're going to use it as a test bed to access our MCP server that we're going to publish. All right. Now, if you have Claude's, the JSON file, and nodes, now you're ready for the next step, which is to set up and generate an actual MCP server from this app Gram. So I'm going to go over to the live part of the demo. And once you've logged into Gram, you should see something like this. It's a dashboard where it's prompting you to get started and publish an MCP server. So what Speakeasy's Gram is going to do is it's going to generate an MCP server from your OpenAPI that you have. It's going to host it, and it's going to allow others to access it. So let's get started. And it's asking you to drop in an OpenAPI file. So remember, we have the OpenAPI file from the weather service. I can click on here and browse to my OpenAPI file and upload it. And it's looking at this file. It came up with a default name. I'm going to leave it as is and hit continue. And now what it's doing, it's generating MCP tools from the API. So it's reading the description of the API, it's understanding it, and it's generating the tools that agents are going to use. If I hit continue again, it asks me to name the MCP server. I'm fine with this default name. And now we have an MCP server. But there's one thing I see here. There's a little warning sign there. And Graham is informing us that, look, typically LLM performance degrades with a large tool set. In this case, we have 53 tools because there's 53 APIs. So that might or might not happen. We'll test it out. But look, if I click here, I get to choose the tools that are active all at the same time. And that's important when you're testing your APIs with MCP. Don't give it everything. Maybe give it one tool at a time, two, maybe a few tools, just so you can get your APIs and your tools to be usable for MCP, and then you can turn more and more on. So I'm going to add and remove tools. I'm just going to disable all the tools and scroll to the ends. And I know there's one of them that really works well with LLMs. It's going to be the give me alerts or weather alerts for one particular region. So let's just click on that. So remember, we disabled all the tools and then we pick one. So now we have one tool that we want to be active on our MCP server, keeping things simple. Gram link, absolutely. Here we go. And I will get there. All right, here's the way to get started with Gram. And if you Google it, Speakeasy Gram, it'll also come up. All right. So here we are. We have one active tool, and I think the next thing we need to do is go back to this MCP tab. The next thing we need to do is, by default, the MCP server is private, which I think is a good thing. And yeah, Ziad, a tool is an API endpoint. A tool can correspond to an API endpoint. It could be a workflow that invokes APIs or other data sources. A tool is something that the LLM or agent can see through your MCP server. It's something that the LLM can invoke. So our MCP server is private. We are going to make it public by hitting this button and going down, scrolling down to visibility and making it public. So you should make it public, otherwise people can't access it. And right now, okay, Vibhu, you don't see the same Speakeasy Gram. It's asking for setup. You should be able to onboard through here. If you start building login, you should be able to see a dashboard like I described. You should be able to see this creation. So let me move forwards for a bit here, and we'll come back if you're having difficulty. So, and the next question is, what API do we activate? The idea is that you get to the National Weather Service, download the OpenAPI that they have, and you will use that to upload to Gram to generate the OpenAPI server, the MCP server. All right, so this is the Weather OpenAPI MCP. This is your hosted URL where it's living, and it's public. And now we have a file here. This is the MCP servers file, and we're going to use that in Claude to just test it out and see if it works. What API do you activate? Well, you can activate any one. In my case, I saw really good ability to work with the Alerts Active Region API. So Alerts Active Region API is the one that you might try. It's worked for me, so I think it's a good API to try. But any one of these would work. And as we'll see in the next demo, we can also activate all of them, and for the most part, they'll work. So next thing I want you to do is scroll down. I'm on the MCP tab. Scroll down. This is your configuration file for Claude. We're going to open up Claude, and we're going to add the configuration file so it knows where the MCP server is hosted, and we're going to use it in Claude. So here's the configuration file. I'm going to copy it. It's going to look something like this. Remember, we said it's public, and anybody can use it. So it's going to look something like this. It's a short file. And the next thing we can do is go into Claude. This is our local instance of Claude. And we can hit Settings and go over down, scroll down to Developer Settings. Okay, so Claude, open up Claude locally, go to Settings, and hit the Developer Settings. And hit Edit Config. What that's going to do is it's going to open up a file dialog, and it's going to have a file called Claude Desktop Config JSON, which you can open with your favorite editor. Here it is. I use VS Code, but you can use any editor. So this file is to tell Claude exactly, as Pancrazio says, where to access our MCP server. So I'm just going to paste it in over whatever is there in Claude. And I'm going to look at it. It says, oh, MCP servers, there's a Gram Weather OpenAPI. This is how it's going to invoke it. The arguments are going to be the remote server is this URL on Gram. This is good. and it's also sending in a header to the API for a user agent. Our weather API does say that I need a string for a user agent. You can import that from environment variables, but I'm just going to say something random here, and it's just a string. And you might not even need that. It might work without it, but I like to use it. And then you're going to hit save. Very importantly, you're going to hit save. Now, the configuration file is in Claude. Claude is pointing to the MCP server. The only thing we need to do now is, I told you it's a little hacky, we have to close Claude and restart it. It's not going to work otherwise because Claude starts up the configuration again when it opens up again. So I open it up again. Now, if there was anything wrong with your configuration file, it would give you an error here. I'm not seeing an error, so I'm kind of hopeful that this all worked out. You can go look at the configuration, but the simplest way to know if my tools are there, I can tell Claude, hey, what tools do you have access to? Simple as that. And if everything goes well, it's going to tell me a bunch of tools, and it's also going to show the weather tool from the weather API. So, web tools, content creation, analysis, these are the kind of built-in tools. But the last thing I see for weather is, hey, I have access to marine weather alerts, and I can check active weather alerts for marine regions. So now, this is Claude calling out to the MCP server, saying, hey, what tools do you have? List me your tools. The MCP server is giving back the tools and is passing back any information it has. And Claude begins to understand the use of the tools and even interprets what the API is capable of and presents you with this information. So this is a huge step. Now our LLM or our agents is able to understand what's going on with an API. And you saw it took us, maybe 15 minutes to set it up, not that long. And I can use the API. I can say, give me the alerts for region California. That's where I am. I want the alerts for here. All right, let's see what it does. Okay. So the next thing we see is that Claude asks the human in the loop to allow access to the tool. You want to have that. Who generated the descriptions? The descriptions were generated from the OpenAPI. Graham grabbed all the descriptions and is making them available to the LLM. But the LLM interprets the descriptions and has its own interpretation of it. Okay, so I am authorizing, and this is probably a mistake that the tool did. It somehow decided that the region is going to be Pennsylvania, not California. We're going to try it again. But the LLM is asking me to authorize the tool access. I'm going to say allow once, and for some reason the LLM didn't understand California, or did it? It says Pennsylvania. I don't know why it's doing that, but it did understand California. And now it's bringing back live data about the alerts that are out there. And if I say, give me alerts for region, I don't know, New York, it should do similar things. And it's somehow able to interpret these regions. And here it is. So how does Claude know that using this tool is appropriate for the given prompt? Claude is able to reason. Once you put the tool in there, it will, for anything that resembles, that it looks like it has to do with weather, it will go browse to the tool description, and try to understand it. It doesn't always happen, but models are getting really, really good, and it's able to do that for us. Oh, there you go. Adam knows all about these regions. I don't even know. I'm just using the API here. So is it Claude's LLM that makes the final decision about which tool? Yes. It interprets the user query and tries to find the best thing. And in fact, sometimes if you're not too precise about what you're asking, it will abandon the tool and go looking, or it will go look on the web. And I've seen it done quite a few times. It will try to use the tool. If it's not able to use the tool, it will say, hey, I'm just going to be helpful and go look on the web. So MCP is not intelligent. It's just a pipe, and it's just piping the data. It's just exposing data to the LLM and piping it through to the API and giving back the data that it sees. All the intelligence, all the reasoning happens on the model side. So that's Claude's being able to understand what's going on with our MCP server. All right. Was anybody able to make it happen? Did it work for anybody? I'm really interested. Awesome. Bunch of people. All right. So let's browse through these slides here. They're here in case you want to look at it after. Worked for you after I fought with Node for a while. Yes. Yeah, you got to have Node there, unfortunately. So we're still kind of early days. So we did a configuration with Claude. We saw our results. And Pakachu says, MCP server executes the tool. Yes, it executes the tool. It calls the API. MCP client is the adapter, yes, between the LLM and the server, between the client, the host and the server. And host is the LLM or whatever tool you're using. How does the LLM know which API to call? Based on the description of the API? Yes. Which now points us to the fact that you better have a good API description. You better have a complete and accurate API description. Otherwise, the LLM is going to get confused. It will not know. All right. So next step would be to publish to a registry. Why? We need the world to know. So for our Gram server, all we're going to do is copy our URL that we have, and then we can go to any kind of directory like this one here, MCPSO is one directory, and we'll submit it, and eventually it'll show up in the directory. So all you need to do it is provide some description and provide the URL. So if it works badly, descriptions are the first point of debug. Kind of, yes. And what role does Node.js play here? Node.js allows us to just invoke the MCP server behind the scenes. Node.js is a coding framework, a JavaScript framework, and it's what runs the code that Claude has. I'm thinking that eventually we're going to end up with a little bit friendlier versions of these LLM tools that are able to kind of natively ingest these MCP servers and use them. Right now it's a little hacky, so you have to have Node there. So we kind of completed our workflow, and we submitted to the directory. It's going to take a while for them to for it to show up. We're kind of done. We have a public MCP server, and that's great. But if we have time and if everybody wants to, I would like to show you a second demo with another tool. It's a little bit easier to generate the MCP server, and it works with a registry called Smithery that is going to immediately make our tool accessible to the public. And if you want an MCP server out there, and if we have 10 more minutes time, I'd like to show that. All right, so here's an alternative to Speakeasy's Gram. Okay, it's called Zuplo, and it's originally an API management tool, meaning it's a tool that helps us secure and expose APIs out there. So go into Zuplo, log in, and start for free. It'll ask for your email, and you can use this API management tool for free, at least for a few APIs and MCP servers. So once you're there in Zuplo, you should probably see something like this page. You sign in, give them your email, and then you end up in a landing page. It's not going to have any projects in there because you're going to create your first project. I already have some projects there, but what you're looking to do is create a new project. So hit this new project button, and it's just giving you a random name. Fine, accept that. What you want to do is create an empty project. So not a starter project, an empty project, because we're going to give it the data that we want. So accept the name, empty project, create the project. So it's building out basically an API gateway for us on the internet. And it gave us a URL where this thing lives. Well, now we have to configure and build out the MCP server. The next thing we do is we go one tab over from project to code. And it's actually interesting that they have code behind the configuration of the gateway, because this code, you can put in an editor, and you can also sync it up to GitHub, which is a great way to do configurations as code. So where we would go is this roots.oas.json. I'll put in the chat. So you go to code, roots, OAS, JSON. And we see the same thing that we saw over in Gram. It asks you to import your OpenAPI. So OpenAPI, it's kind of the universal language, if you want, for APIs. So all of these tools understand OpenAPI. So that's why it's important to have OpenAPI. So I'm going to grab the exact same file that we had before, which is the one from the weather service. It's looking at OpenAPI, it's parsing through it, seeing all of these APIs. I'm going to complete the import, and here's a bunch of endpoints. Okay, that's great, but this is still just an API. Now, what I can do is right here in the center, I can click on Add and add an MCP server, right? So this is a way to generate the MCP server. So add an MCP server. I'm going to put it here in the chat. Add an MC. So now I added two of them. I'm going to get rid of one. All right, so now I'm in the MCP server, and the next thing you want to do is just make the path /MCP. Why? Because that's what most registries recognize. It's kind of a unwritten convention. So make the path /MCP. And then I want you to scroll down, and where it says OpenAPI files, just choose this config. A little bit fiddly, but it will work, I promise you. So /MCP for the path, and choose the OpenAPI file. And then very importantly, you have to save. You absolutely have to save, because that configures the server, generates it, hosts it on the edge on Zuplo's cloud. So now we have a gateway and an MCP server that's live on the internet. It's just like where we were before with Gram. So if I tab back to projects, now I can copy my URL. This is where the MCP server lives. So Zuplo helped me host an MCP server that I configured from OpenAPI. It's the same OpenAPI. Notice that it doesn't give us the ability to pick and choose tools. So we're going to have to go with all 53 tools and hope that the LLM is going to figure it out. But I'm going to copy this URL and keep it there so I can access the server. Next, I'm going to go over to one of the most important registries that exist out there. It's called Smithery. And if you go look at Smithery, its homepage, if I can even type, you'll see that it's a directory of various MCP servers. And they have a leaderboard, and they, well, done work today, but they do have a leaderboard, I promise you. And so here's where people can discover MCP servers. And that's what I was talking about earlier. If I am, I don't know, if I am DuckDuckGo, I don't want just anybody to impersonate and pretend that it's the official MCP server. And I don't know if this person here is actually kind of an official representative of that company. So, and as you can see, it's getting used a lot. So what you want is to get ahead of that, publish your own MCP server, get it out there, have people start using it, so you can actually be in control of all that process. All right. So Smithery, one of the well-known MCP registries out there. So we're going to deploy our server in there. So once you're logged in, you're going to hit the deploy server button. And what you want to do is publish via URL. So we're publishing an existing server, and we're doing it via URL. Remember the URL we had over from Zoopla? We're going to use that. So publish via URL. And now it's asking us to name it. And I'm going to say, AI Collective. And hit continue. And now it's asking me for the URL. So I'm just going to go back to Zoopla, copy my URL, the one that's in the project. This is where the MCP server is hosted. Put it in here, and kind of fiddly again, but it's asking you to add /MCP. So Smithery only understands valid URLs ending with MCP. And we're going to hit deploy external server, and we hope it works. So Smithery is looking at the MCP server hosted on Zoopla. It's examining everything. It's scanning it, and hopefully it's going to look at all of the tools here. So fingers crossed. Please work. Demo gods. I've seen it work before, but it's taking its time. Okay, deployment complete. So now Smithery is throwing a playground at me so I can actually talk to the MCP server. Now, this is an MCP server that's public to the world. The entire world can access it, and I can now talk to it. So I can say the classic, what tools can you use? The usual question. And it can also let you use various models. It has like GPT-4.1 and Claude 4. So let me hit that. Talking to the MCP server, listing the tools, understanding the tools, and it's saying, hey, here's all the aviation data tools. So now it's going through the entire tool set, and it's telling you various tools that it has. So now we know it works, and that's great. But what's the next step? Can we use it in Claude? So let's go over to Overview on Smithery, and that's kind of your main dashboard. And you'll see here that it gives you the URL where it's hosted, the MCP server. I can copy that. And then all I have to do, and this is the amazing power of MCP, all I have to do is go and just hit that configuration file on Claude, put that URL in there, and Claude would now understand the other MCP server. Not the original from Graham, but the other one from Zoopla. So if I go over to, let's go to my editor, just gonna replace this URL. Everything else can be the same. I can say, it's not the Graham weather API, it's the Zoopla weather API. Hit save, and remember, sadly, I have to restart Claude. So I'm gonna do just that. And now Claude is started up again. One thing that you'll see is that Smithery is prompting me, and you might not see it here, but Smithery is going to prompt me to connect. So I didn't give it any credentials, but Smithery will prompt me and will let me connect. So I kind of missed showing you that step, but it is going to come up as a prompt to basically enter your credentials for Smithery and connect. So now I'm back in Claude. I don't see any errors. That's great. I don't know, use a better model. And I can say, give me the weather alerts for area CA. Okay. And sure enough, Claude is kind of over capacity there, so we're going to try it again. Yeah, Claude is having a bad day. You know what? Let's go back to another model. Maybe that's going to help it. Give me the weather alerts for area CA. Oh, it's doing it. So it's hitting the Zoopla weather API. I can see the params here that is passing, and I can say allow once, and it'll fetch the alerts. Okay. But now, of course, you're going to have a whole lot more tools to play with, not just the alerts. Give me the forecast for JFK Airport. Let's see if it hits my API. It's hitting the API. I'm allowing it once. And now it's looking for the aviation forecasts. Now it's calling tools in a sequence. And because it's calling tools in a sequence, sometimes it will get confused, sometimes it will work it out. But it called two APIs. I can actually look at what API calls it made here. I can actually drop it down and look. And it figured out that the identifier for JFK is KJFK, which is great. And now it's giving us all the aviation information, which is actually true and accurate. So that's Claude accessing the MCP server on that Zoopla hosted instance. And of course, now you have your MCP server on a well-known registry. You're able to use it in any client. So where do you go from here? Let's browse through all of this. We did all this. This is great, successful. And it worked on Claude. So our takeaways. First of all, as you can see, it's a little bit fiddly and hacky, and you have to be aware of the complexity and the vulnerabilities. You have to have a complete and validated OpenAPI for all of this to work. And my advice is to test one API at a time. Choose one tool until you can make that API reliable and then iterate on that. APIs must be simple, and I'll send out in the follow-up email, I'll send out a resource where I have some advice about designing APIs that work well with LLMs. And my advice is to publish your MCP server soon. You don't want anybody else to kind of have control over that. Think of it as the domain name in the old days. And get it in front of users, get them to use it, see where you go from there. Again, think of it as the early websites in the early days of the web. And of course, publish and control your MCP server. Publish to more registries. There's lots of registries out there. There's even a meta registry, or registries about registries. Get your MCP out there. Try it in additional clients. It's going to work differently in additional clients. It doesn't have to be just LLMs and agents. It can be IDEs like Cursor and Windsurf. So try it in those. And also, next step would be to try an API that requires authentication. Today, auth works well with APIs. API key is a little bit hacky. We haven't figured that out yet. You have to pass the API key in. It's kind of janky, but try that and see how that works. And over time, um, redesign and evolve your APIs to get more reliable with agents. If you want a video of what that looks like, here's how to redesign your APIs in that video. Yes, and Bagratio says fast MCP is great. Where is it? Here's the fast MCP page. You can basically code up an MCP server as well in this way. So good call, Pancrazio there. And where do you go to learn more? So first of all, there's the official, I'll paste the links here for you. The official MCP docs. You should definitely look at the official docs and the official spec. Follow my friend Kevin Swiber on LinkedIn. He's great. Look at a couple of posts by Speakeasy. One is like a basics, what is MCP? The other one is MCP for skeptics, which is really, really great because I was a skeptic. And then the folks over at Zuplo, Adrian, has a really good masterclass, a video about securing MCP, which you should really pay attention to. It's kind of outside the scope of what we talked about today. He's also got a scaling MCP masterclass. Video's not there, but I'll send it out as soon as it's posted. So these are the links. And then last but not least, I do have a course on a platform called Maven where we talk about all of this. And we basically create an OpenAPI spec, an API design using AI, using an LLM, validated with best practices and so on. And then we generate a mock API from that, go out and validate it with customers. Then we vibe code an API in Replit, build its documentation, build analytics, and then finally build the MCP server, put in a registry, put it out there to the world. So this course basically gets you to the latest thinking and the latest tools around APIs and AI. And it is the first cohort that I'm introducing, coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm including a complimentary Lenny subscription. If you don't know what that is, it's a great newsletter and community. But more importantly, the subscription includes a full year's access to these amazing tools like Replit, Lovable, Bolt, Perplexity, Superhuman, and so on. So it's like, I don't know for how long we're going to be able to do stuff like this, but right now there's so many tools that are amazing that you can play with, and you can get them basically for either $200 on Lenny's newsletter, or if you buy the course, I'll include one of these. And just because you're in this session, we also have a code for a further $100 off that introductory pricing. So, come and attend my course. I would love it if you're there. I would love it if you work with me. It's going to be in the style of what we did here today, basically, all hands on and working through things. And it's going to be fairly intensive. You on your laptop working and producing artifacts that you can use in your day to day. And with that, let's go to my Q&A. If anybody has questions, let me know. All right, Pratik says, one issue I kept facing during creation of workflow using is token limits. Okay, so you're talking about creating a workflow on an MCP server. And yes, basically all of this stuff is going to use token. It's going to use the context window. So you're going to hit the limits. So that's why we're saying keep the MCP server simple. Make sure those descriptions are good and accurate and evolve them over time. Packed all of that into an hour. I know it was quick. You should review the recording and the slides and go through the demo yourself. Hopefully you'll get your MCP server out there and get started on that journey. How long is the live session? It's 2 sessions of 3 hours, so total 6 hours. And we also have an AMA session after that. And it's going to be over 2 days. First cohort I'm doing is going to be on a weekend. for people that are super busy during the week. The next cohort is going to be on a Thursday and Friday, and I would love to see you there. All right. Any other questions? I'm not sure, AJ, if you had a chance to. What's the cost? Okay, easy enough. So to you, the cost with the code is $6.99, and remember, it includes also the bundle for all the tools. Here's what the bundle looks like. Frankly, folks, I'm amazed that we can do this. Like, I don't know for how long we're going to be able to do stuff like this. Like, all of these tools you can get with my course, and they work for a year, and you have access to this amazing newsletter for people that build products. So you got Lovable, Bold, Gamma, Replit, N8N, Whisper Flow, Perplexity, Superhuman. It's just, yeah.
I'm personally paying for like 80% of those tools right now.
And it's, I mean, there's got to be like 10K of value in there. So again, we'll see how long we're able to do that for.
Absolutely. And I see a couple questions, and we've gotten some questions throughout today's session saying, hey, are we going to be able to get this presentation? All of our recordings are going to be available on Maven as well as sent to you via email. So everybody who was here today, you'll be able to watch it back. Anybody that wasn't here, you'll still get the recordings as well. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being so attentive. Honestly, we ran over on time. Questions throughout the whole thing. Like, I think this is the most engaged session that I have seen in Collective Intelligence so far. So just a quick round of applause for Emmanuel. Thank you so much for taking your time. And quick round of applause for everybody that showed up today. Look at us getting one step closer to the future of AI. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you again. And we will see you guys in the emails.
Thank you all very much. Please reach out.
See ya.